Morning, everyone, or afternoon, or hello. Okay, so today's video is going to be about command words, or rather, understanding command words and the demands that the command words place upon you. AQA have said quite recently that there's a problem with students not really answering the question, and is actually one of the most common pieces of feedback examiners give is they write NAQ, which means not answering the question. The majority of the time, the student has not understood the command word. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do have a site here from AQA outlining all of the potential command words that come up. Now, hopefully by now you understand what a command word is, but it's essentially arguably the first word you go to in a question where it's demanding you show some sort of knowledge or skill, basically. So some come up obviously a lot more than others. Choose isn't particularly common, nor is comment. Present an informed opinion doesn't come up that much. Compare is coming up more and more. Describe and discuss. Discuss is probably the key one, I think, to be honest. That you do need to know about. Draw, okay. Evaluate. This one's a big one. Explain. I have literally yesterday been in training with AQA, and one of the four key weaknesses that students had in the 2023 exam season was explain questions. That's how important it is. It was one of the four major weaknesses that students showed alongside issues and debates, application and linking back. Explain questions. Now, you may be asked to explain how, you may be asked to explain why. I'll briefly go through both of those, not in too much detail. And as we go through, and what I will try to do, I will try to put this video as a hyperlink down at the bottom of the video. Some of them are quite easy. Some of them are quite easy. So, for example, identify, just name it. Give, just name it. State, again, just name it. Some are more complicated. Right? They're quite easy, actually. What I want to do is I want to go through, though, and show you some examples about these coming up. So the first one I want to show you is describe. Comes up a hell of a lot. It's come up 84 times before, but describe is essentially, if we have a look here, describe the phonological loop. Describe is essentially you giving as much detail as possible. You will never be asked more than 6 marks. Well, I say you will never be asked. Up to this point, you've never been asked more than 6 marks for a single description study. For 6 marks, a useful guide for the essay. So, for if we have a look, so if I just go through, let me find a pure 6 marker describe question. This one just here, for example. Describe interference as an explanation for forgetting 6 marks. You will not, and rather, there has never been a case of you having a described question that is more than 6 marks. So for 6 marks, a useful guide is for 6 marks, you want to aim for 8 separate points, 8 separate elements, 8 separate ticks you want to get from the examiner. So you need to be able to describe every theory, treatment, and study enough to be able to get 8 ticks on it, if there's 8 ticks on it, of course. Describe is pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. It comes up quite a lot in describe and evaluate questions, for example. So they're the basic essays. They're the basic ones. They're the really easy ones to wrap your head around. Describe can be quite difficult sometimes. Just trying to find one. Yeah, I mean, they're pretty simple. The other one I want to just mention as well, it does come up quite a lot, is outline. Now, outline is essentially you want to give the main characteristics. So, yes, you do get outline and for 6 marks, but often it's kind of with an evaluation. It's quite rare, not impossible, but it's rare that you get just outline for 6 marks. it is rare. Does come up obviously, but outline 2 definitions for 4 marks. Outline means just to give the main characteristics. You're not describing. It's a lesser form of description. Um, of course, if you do describe when you're asked to outline, you'll probably get the marks anyway. But describe outline is actually quite common. Another one I want to talk about here, which it does actually throw students quite a lot. It doesn't come up a hell of a lot of the time. It's only ever come up twice. Is distinguish. Distinguish between obsessions and compulsions. And then the other one was distinguish between 2 other types of attachment. Whenever I've given these in CAPS or topic tests, students don't really do well here. By distinguish, you have to explain ways in which 2 things are different. It's similar to compare. It is kind of compared, to be perfectly honest with you, but explain ways in which 2 things differ. Doesn't come up that often, but in this case, you'd have to say distinguish between 2 other types of attachment. Well, that's based on the question before. I'll come off to go have a look at that. Let's have a look at this one. Distinguish between obsessions and compulsions. I would say for that, you're looking for one distinction, but talking about both sides. So off the top of my head, a difference between obsessions and compulsions would be kind of almost where they take place. Obsessions are very internal, whereas compulsions are very external because they're their behavior. Obsessions are thinking, compulsions are behavior. So that would be a way to distinguish between them. Another big one is evaluate. Another big one is evaluate, of course. Now, you may be asked, like here, to outline, evaluate. Evaluate comes up with quite a lot of other command words, really. Outline and evaluate, and typically when you're asked to evaluate, you have to write PEALs, though not all the time. If you're asked for like brief limitations, then probably not. But if you have a look here, describe and evaluate, fine. Where it tricks people sometimes, let me just find this again. Look, they're all describe and evaluate the biological approach, for example. Here we go. Now we're talking. Look, this one here, briefly evaluate defense mechanisms as a way of explaining human behavior. For that question there, I would put 2 evaluations, but not peeled. 2 evaluations, a little bit of evidence, maybe a tiny sprinkling of elaboration, but you're not writing full structured peels here. The reason why I would write 2 peels is because it does actually ask you to briefly evaluate. And for 4 marks, I think you're probably looking at 2 marks per evaluation. I'm after something. Again, a briefly evaluate comes up again, same sort of thing. I would do 2 brief evaluations, but not full peels there. Outline, evaluate one part of the brain. Outline, evaluate reductionist explanations. So it comes up quite a lot. What I'm after, I for some reason can't find, and it's really irritating me. What I'm after is basically your standard. There we go. No, when evaluation comes up by itself. Evaluate one psychological explanation for schizophrenia. Do you know what's never come up? Actually, now I think about this, this is actually quite good. The questions that are highlighted here, just pure evaluation, the most they've ever actually asked by itself, just evaluate, is 6 marks. And for that, I think you have to write 2 peels. One thing they've never done, the 10 marks you get for AO3 in an essay, AO3 equals 10. They've never just done that separately by itself. That might be something you want to look out for, or certainly be prepared for. They've never done a 10 marker before by itself, never done a 10 marker. I don't even know whether they can do it, right? But that is actually irrelevant. You need to be prepared for it anyway, because AQA will throw loads of curveballs at you in ways they've never asked before, and asking just a pure, I don't know off the top of my head, evaluate biological explanations for schizophrenia, 10 marks. That would be a great way to throw the cat amongst the pigeons. But it's something you probably want to be prepared for. And to be honest, you should be prepared for that anyway. But like I say, evaluate does come up quite a lot. The tricky ones, as I've said, are the explain questions. Now, let's start with explain how. Explain how you are going to have to explain a procedure of some kind. Explain how you are going to have to explain a procedure, and chances are it is going to be in context. It's going to be an AO2 question. There's going to be a STEM. Let's have a look at this one here about Martine. Martine's got schizophrenia. She's afraid because she believes her care workers are trying to hurt her. She hears voices telling her to lock her windows, blah, blah, blah. And the question here is explain how, so go through a process, explain how a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapist, might treat Martine's symptoms. So you're going to have to explain the process there in the context, the process, the procedure of CBT in the context of Martine. Another one here is Bertie, right? Bertie says, I can't stop eating chocolate. He's addicted to chocolate. Fair play, Bertie, right? I thought Bertie would have been addicted to sweets personally, but I just need more and more. Eating chocolate gives me such a great feeling, blah, blah, blah. And then you got to say, explain how covert sensitization. Now, it's not all to do with treatments. It's not all to do with treatments. That's just an easy one to use. Explain how does come up quite a lot. For example, explain how Ash's conformity research illustrates one of these features of science. You need to describe how Ash is linked to one of those. It could be another stem there. It could be yet another stem there. Explain how Jenny might be able to persuade the rest of the department to accept her view, for example. It comes up a hell of a lot. And with reference to the article, explain how, again, AO2. This one here is a little bit different. Explain, this is an AO1, explain how social influence processes contribute to social change. So all of this is a process, it's a procedure. You have to explain it, usually in AO2. The other one that's really tricky, which students really do struggle with, there's actually quite a lot of this in research methods, but is explain why. Now, explain why is going to be linked to AO2 as well. Using your knowledge of research into the effects of anxiety, explain why Xena and Amanda's statements are different. So that's explain why is linking it more to explanations. That's really key to note, by the way. Explain why is linking linking maybe an AO2 specifically to explanations. Using your knowledge, using your theory knowledge. Explain why the company wanted to use a famous rugby player. So tricky questions, not something you can revise for. Explain why and not something you can revise for. Using your knowledge of social learning theory, explain why Grace might be more likely to tidy her room in the future. In this case, money was given out. The only way you can revise this is knowing that, is actually knowing what the theory is. You then explaining it is quite a complex skill. So explain why and explain how have specifically been pointed out by AQA to say that students are awful doing this. Students are really, really quite bad. There's a couple of easier ones. So state is an easy one. So look, here we go. State one assumption of the cognitive approach. That the mind works like a computer. 1 mark, very easy. Agentic state. This one's easy. Give the name of the researcher, it's Lorenzo Harlow, and state the animal being researched, right? Grey lag geese or rhesus monkeys. So they're quite rare, but they are very, very easy. State, identify, label, or what's the other one? I'm sure it's another one. Just do that. Or name. Just do that. Don't write whole sentences. Don't write whole paragraphs. If it asks you to state, just state. You'll get marks if you write a full paragraph, obviously, but it's a complete waste of time. The last one, not the last one, the penultimate one is compare. Now, compare is a tricky one because I think it's going to become more I think it's going to become more of a problem, particularly in comparisons of in approaches. So a lot of the time, you're asked to outline the let's say the behaviourist approach, and then compare the behaviourist approach with the biological approach. In terms of not reading the question, this is a classic. Basically, um, it says outline the behaviourist approach and then compare behaviourism to biological. People outline both the behaviourist and the biological. It didn't ask that, right? So make sure you're sticking to the demands of the question. Have a look at this one here. This one has no outline. This one just jumps straight in, compare humanism with psychodynamic. And yet students still wrote and still write for CAPS massives of AO1. Massives of, when actually AO1's not relevant here. Yes, AO1 does come up there, but all you'd have to do for this question is write 3 or 4 comparison points. That's all you have to do. 3 or 4 comparison points. That's all you would have to do. No outline, no descriptions of these. The last one, arguably the most important one, and actually a very, very common one that comes up, as you can see, 96 examples of this, is discuss. The best way to think of discuss is describe and evaluate. Honestly, the best way to think of discuss is describe and evaluate. It not technically isn't that, it's its own thing. But in terms of understanding the AOs, in terms of understanding how to structure your appeals and your essays and questions as a whole, you need to view discuss as describe and evaluate. So we've got one here, for example. He's got a big thing about Jay. His dad had schizophrenia. His mum worries excessively. And the question is, discuss. Again, see that as describe and evaluate, because the describe is the AO1, the evaluate is the AO3. Discuss one or more explanations for schizophrenia, refer to Jay. That's describe and evaluate, essentially, right? Same thing here. Discuss the use of an interactionist approach in explaining and treating schizophrenia. So you'd have to describe and you'd have to evaluate. From now on, I want you to view discuss as essentially describe and evaluate, because discuss explanations for gambling addictions, all you have to do there is describe and evaluate. So just from now on, view discuss questions as describe and evaluate. Anyway, I will try to remember. I will try to remember to put the command words on. It is worth just reiterating here. The mark scheme will be based upon the command word. If you are asked to describe, you will be looking to have to give detail. If you're asked to outline, you won't be required to give that much detail. So stick to the command words. AQA put a hell of a lot of effort into writing down the correct answers and the command word and stuff like that. So make sure you are directly responding to the command word in the question. Failure to do that, and you will get an NA, you will almost guaranteed to get an NAQ written next to your answer and not answering the question. The command word is by far the most important word in the entire question. Make sure you're sticking to it like glue. As always, hope this is useful. Yes, peace out.